Multi-select inputs in the CommandBox CLI work a lot like radio buttons, checkboxes, or select options in HTML. Instead of allowing the user to enter free text, you present a list of choices, eliminating the risk of typos and standardizing the results. The features of multi-select inputs I'm going to be going over are covered in the interactivity section of the CommandBox documentation under Developing for CommandBox, Commands, Interactivity. We're going to be working with our example date help command. And for this example, we'll use a multi-select input to help configure the command settings. To do that, within the date help namespace, we'll build a command called configure. We'll set this up as a basic command. And because we're going to be working with the settings for the module, for the custom command, we'll need to inject those. So I'm going to inject the settings struct, which will give me all of the settings for the module. And just so we can see what this looks like while we're working on it, I will return those settings. So let's hop over to the shell and reload. So now we can run date help configure, and it will show us the settings for the module. And you'll see we just have birthday, which is an empty string. So in order to use multi-select inputs, we'll be adding a couple more settings. For a date help command, a helpful setting might be the format, the default format for the dates that it's going to return. So we'll set the default format in our module config, and we'll say it's short. So throughout the module, we can update it to use short unless the user overrides this setting. And let's just reload the shell to confirm that that change got picked up. And if we run date help configure, okay, we have short, the default birthday format. So we'll be able to use that within our command. Now, the way I envision this function working is that it just walks the user through the various settings that are possible in order to configure the command. So in birthday, there's the setting for asking about their birthday. That could go in here. And we'll also use a multi-select input for that default formatting of the date. Now we'll hop over to the documentation and take a look at that. At a basic level, a multi-select input is multi-select, and then you chain options onto that. So you set the question, then you can set options, and you conclude it by asking that to the user. Copy this and we'll update it for our command. So multi-select set question. Please select the default date format. The options will be, we could always give more, but that's a good starting point. Call this format. And so we can see what's going on, we'll return that format. And you'll see that because we're not overriding this to allow multiple selects, only one thing can be selected, we should be receiving one of these as a string in this variable. So now if we run date help configure, we're going to be prompted with our multi-select input. And here it is. Please select a default date format. Should have gotten rid of that question mark. And we have our options. And now I can use the arrow keys to navigate up and down. And I can use spacebar, as the comments say there, to select my choice. So I will select medium and then enter. And you'll see medium as a string was returned, just as we wanted. Get rid of that question mark, extra S. Now let's take that command again, but this time let's try not answering it. So please select a default format. I haven't hit spacebar to toggle my selection. I'm just going to hit enter. Now you'll see this multi-select input, you're able to bypass it. So no string was returned here. No value was selected. The user just bypassed the input. And in some cases, that's fine. They might not need to make a selection for a particular prompt that you're giving them, but there are times that you'll want it to be required. In order to do this, we tack a set required equal to true onto the chain. And now when I run date help configure, if I don't select an option, I'm hitting enter, but it's not allowing the prompt to continue. Require forces the user to select an option. So I'll pick long, and then the prompt is allowed to continue. So set required, the user cannot continue with the script unless they select an option. Now there's another helpful feature of the multi-select inputs that you don't need to do anything to enable. If we run date help configure, you'll notice, or maybe you won't, that the first letters of each of these are highlighted. So if I type M, I go to medium, L takes me to long, S takes me back to short. It's a convenient keyboard-based way to navigate the options. But you'll see with this example here, we're going to run into an issue because we have two that begin with M, and M will only take me to the first. So we can use keyboard navigation, but when we have it set up the way that we currently do, there's some shortcomings to it. So how can we bypass that and enable some more robust control over those options? Well, rather than configuring our options as a string, we can configure them as an array, and that gives us more control over some various elements for these. So that's what we'll take a look at now, configuring our options as an array. At a basic level, the array only needs, it's an array of structs, and they only need a value. So if we just wanted to replicate our functionality that we had before, we would do this. And reload the shell. So if we run date help configure now, we'll get the same behavior that we had before, but we're defining our elements as an array of structs. Now with this, there are more options that we can configure. So let's address our first shortcoming. We want to add a keyboard shortcut so that we can access month, month, day, day, year, year from the keyboard. So to do that, we add an access key property, and we'll set it to whatever value we want. And in this case, since month, month, day, day, year, year is a custom format, we will give it C, and we'll reload the shell. So now when we run date help, we can use C, and that will select month, month, day, day, year, year, year for us. Now, one of the issues with this right now is that we can see the SML for the first ones, but we don't see that keyboard shortcut for our custom date format. So I know that I can press C, but the user would not know that C was the keyboard shortcut for that option. So how can we get around that? Let's hop back in here. And while our value is month, month, day, day, year, 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 we can add a display. And within the display, we'll write some prompt that indicates that this is the keyboard shortcut. And this might not be the most helpful. We could rework the language and the structure of this. This will at least give the user some indication that the keyboard shortcut for this option is C. And we'll need to make sure we add our comma here. So now if we run date help, you'll see that C brings us down here. And actually, CommandBox is highlighting that C. So we might restructure this to be more user-friendly. Something like, so now that C is displayed down there. And I'm not sure what the most appropriate way is for showing that keyboard shortcut. That's not too terrible, but you could revise it, whatever suits your use case. That C could be put first, actually, and maybe that would be more helpful. But regardless, you can display one thing, and if we hit enter now and select that option, you'll see the value returned is different from what we had displayed. So we can show the user one thing, but return a different value, which is very helpful. Now there's two more elements of this that I want to go over. One is that we don't have a value selected by default. So in order to do that, we can add a selected equals true. So you'll see that now, because we have that, the short option is selected by default. But that also makes it easier so the user doesn't have to toggle the selection if they just want to continue through hitting enter. So we'll hit enter. And the final aspect of multi-select inputs that I want to show you is how we can enable multiple options to be selected. So we're not limited to returning a string. We can enable multiple selections so that an array is in fact returned. This is done by setting multiple equal to true, which is not particularly helpful for our command here, but I just want to show you how it works, and then we'll roll it back. And in this case, I'm just going to print the result rather than returning it. Okay, and we'll reload the shell. Okay, and when I run date help configure now, I can also select medium, long, and even that final option. And when I hit enter, you'll see that format selection that we set was an array. All of those options were selected and returned. So again, not particularly helpful for this example, but it may be helpful for a command that you are building. So with that, let's roll that back. Don't need that to happen. And let's just finish up making this command slightly more helpful. We'll grab the prompt from birthday, we'll add that to it, and then we'll take this command and we'll use the selection from our multi-select input to configure that. Config set modules format equal to format, and then we'll return a nice message that just says, thanks. And now when we run date help configure, we're prompted for the birthday, and I'm just saying Christmas. And we have our multi-select for our default, and the module is configured, so we can now run, if it worked, config show CommandBox date help, and the module has been configured with that prompt that we set up in that module. So just to summarize, we reviewed how we could set up a multi-select input with multi-select, set options as a list of a string, or use an array of structs, which enabled us to select a default input, add different displays and values, provide an access key, make the select required, and also enable multiple selections. So multi-select is a very versatile interactivity prompt. If you want to remember all those options, you should probably do what I do and just go and reference the documentation. Thanks.